Well, I said no to football scholarships, and I realized early on that if I was going to trade my time for the money of a football scholarship, they were going to own me for a period of serious time. And I said no to full ride football scholarships, and a lot of people still think I'm crazy, but I studied journalism and film. It took a lot of my time. I don't know how I would have played football and done the work that I needed to for the career and the academic value I wanted. And I ran into public access television at WELM in East Lansing, Michigan, part of Michigan State University, and it was one of the earliest centers in the 1972 or 3. And as a journalism student, I came in there to write for a nightly news program and found it fascinating. And when I graduated, went back to my hometown, found out they had language to allow for a public access channel, and it had been sitting for 3 years in a contract that had been approved, including $100,000 in capital startup funding back in the mid-70s, and nobody had done anything. So a group of local citizens got together, and Sue Buskey came in to Grand Rapids, Michigan in 78, 9, somewhere in there, and talked about some strategies. And in 1980, the board of directors was formed in Grand Rapids. I was hired in 1981. And they can't get rid of me. Well, no, it wasn't so easy. I actually worked at PBS in between college and, no, I worked PBS, community college, and then GRTV, which is what we started. So I came out of college with a journalism degree and an English major and worked for PBS for a short time, jumped over to the community college and helped start 2 channels there, again for a year, and then into public access television at 24 years old. But the budget was only, $50,000. The future looked bright, but no guarantees. And a lot of the more established professionals in the community weren't willing to take the risk. So it was a wonderful opportunity for a naive, energetic, hopeful young person to dive in as executive director, which was a long title and a short paycheck. Well, it may have been that way in the past. I'm happy to say about 4 or 5 years ago, I stepped out of being station manager of GRTV, which is the public access channel. And now Chuck Peterson, who's been a 12-year employee of the Media Center, is the station manager of GRTV, and he's taking on a much larger role in the public access component of what we now call the Media Center. And so the Media Center has 5 affiliates, and each affiliate has a director or station manager. So I manage the Media Center, and there are specialists in each area. And so some of the old timers may realize, that there's a synonymous correlation between myself and the channel. But a lot of folks now realize that the Media Center is much more than just GRTV. With our radio operation, WYCE, our computer and civic network operation called GrandNet. We have an Institute for Research and Democracy called the Grand Rapids Institute of Information Democracy. We have GrandNet, which I mentioned, and we're working on a community archive center, which is called Community Memory Bank. And we'll be preserving old films, old videotapes, computer viruses, people's original home pages, kind of preserving information technology from the past for future research. Well, budget-wise, we have operated in the past with a franchise fee support from the cable company. So there's been a steady growth of almost 10% a year of franchise fee pass-through. The city of Grand Rapids receives 3% of gross revenue, and the Community Media Center gets a pass-through of 2% of gross revenue from the cable company. And so that too has grown from 50,000 to maybe 400,000 within that period of time. The additional revenue has come from the other affiliates. And we decided almost 7 or 8 years ago that as a public access cable television center, our future wasn't as secure as it should be. And we said, let's diversify services because people need access to more than just cable TV, and let's diversify income because it's never healthy to have an operation subsidized by a single source. It's like a giant tent with one pole in the center. That pole snaps and you suffocate from the weight of everything else. So we aggressively changed our organizational structure to allow for expansion into multi-affiliates like radio, internet, research, archiving, and we've diversified income where the radio station generates over $200,000 income and separately from the Home Media Center. The Research Institute, maybe 50,000. Computer Network Services, maybe another 200,000. We do a lot of grant and research, so we diversified income. The capital campaign to renovate the old library was both naive and kind of crazy. We hadn't raised much money throughout 10 years of our existence. We woke up one day and said, we need new space. We need integrated space to allow for the infusion of radio, internet, and archive and research. We want to build it on a digital platform. We want to blend the old with the new and be part of a community. So we found a gorgeous old library that was in threat of being closed in a kind of a rough neighborhood, but near downtown, plenty of parking, free, which our members demanded. And we kind of sat around, the board of directors, myself, and a few citizen activists, and said, we got to do this, we got to raise this money, how do we do it? We went to specialists who said, this is how you do a capital campaign. The first thing they told us is you're supposed to go to one of these research firms that goes into the community to see what the likelihood is of your success in a capital campaign. So you pay these people and they go talk to foundations and major givers. And I knew we weren't going to do that, because if we would have had one of these consulting groups assess the validity of a capital campaign, they would have said we're out of our minds. You haven't raised any money, you do controversial programming, nobody had heard of the digital divide, nobody was even talking information superhighway or internet when we started that part of the renovation. And so we skipped the step of an ascertainment of our likelihood of success and just said, we got to do it. We got to do it. We're going to do it. It took a lot longer than most of these things do, but we raised it's over 2 million, 2.5 million, and we need to raise the last amount for the full capital campaign. Very little city money, only 72,000 of that was city money, no cable company money. So this is money from the community, banks, churches, other nonprofit organizations, private foundations, billboard companies, Burger King, all across the board, the major foundations, and that money went into renovation and restoring this grand old 1925 Carnegie-style library into a model of a media center fusing voice, video, and data on a ubiquitous digital platform. I think for long-term survival, we've got to even quit thinking about community television as such, the whole channel to many on the backbone of the cable television industry. I happen to be a student of Albert Einstein in quantum physics and mechanics, and it's been a blessing for me to kind of be diving down into the realm of particles and how they move and how they're attracted to each other and repelled from each other. And so when the idea of digital communication came along, it was very easy, at least for me, to understand the general notion of converting voice, video, and data into a single platform of bit stream traffic, whether it's fiber optic or cellular or wireless. And so it just makes sense to me that a bit is a bit is a bit. Whether it ultimately ends up being a TV show or audio or data or voice or an amalgam of all of those things, a bit is a bit. And community television happens to be in this world of sending 6 megahertz of analog signals across a cable system to a home on a specific channel. Well, that's one mode of transport, and it's a mode that even the cable industry is abandoning, frankly. They're going to digital, they're going to internet, they're going to fusion of internet and digital at the same time. So I think community media as bitstream activists, those of us who are trying to use technology for social improvement, we have to embrace what appears to be on the future, and that is digital integration of voice, video, and data on a common platform of bitstream transport. And we just do what we do. I mean, we don't care. The technology is somewhat immaterial. I love what I heard from somebody once saying they want our holes, right? They want holes, but they buy drills, because the drill's the tool to give you the hole. Well, we have camcorders, but it's not the camcorder we're after. It's the social change or the influence of the programming. And it's not the programming just on television. It's whatever distribution vehicle we can have. 5,000 men are going to go out tomorrow, radio, buy drills, all of the above. We have a megaphone community center, because a producer came in and said, look, there's a gang hanging out on my street corner. I think they're dealing drugs. They're not a valuable part of my community, and I want to communicate with them. They don't watch your TV channel. They don't listen to your radio station. I sure as hell know they're not on the internet. But I want to communicate with them. What should I do? And we all thought about it, and actually he came up with the idea of a megaphone. So we went to Radio Shack for 85 bucks, bought a megaphone. We check it out next to camcorders, laptops, projection devices. There's a megaphone. And he would drive by the gang in his neighborhood on the street corner with the window down and yell out, disperse, disperse, and then drive away, you know. Did it work? I don't know exactly if communication was all that successful, but it's the principle that he needed to communicate. He didn't need the internet. He didn't need community radio, broadcast FM radio. He didn't, you know, need high-speed bandwidth. He needed to communicate with somebody in his neighborhood, and a megaphone was the solution. So the tools are immaterial. Yeah, I mean, as with all technology, I have a love-hate with it. I love to hate it, and I hate to love it. You know, real-time or delayed communication electronically through computer connections. But there is a fear that this whole virtual world can diminish the brick-and-mortar community that we live in. And what I see as a trend, and I read this in publications too, is that there is a need, and the internet has ready to fill a need, both community-based and commercial-based, that are ready to fill a need to carve the internet down to size and to index local applications. So, in other words, you would say, if you walk into a library, it's got 1 million books in it, but there isn't a card catalog or an index, it's not going to do you much good. You got to go pawing through shelves to find what you want. Well, the internet's kind of that 1 million volume library with some index, some search engines, but why not a local search engine that indexes everybody in your county who's online, what's there, how to get there quickly, and where the chat groups are. You know what I mean? To start, you know, it started off as the Big Bang explosion. Well, now it's starting to collapse back in on itself a little bit, and the internet needs to be corralled in some local geographic-based markets. And there's civic networks and different groups that are coming up with these models of these searchable relational databases in and around a geographic area. And that makes perfect sense, and the technology allows for it. So I think it's up to some community activists and visionaries to see to it that we don't just get into this vast array of information floating around. And the other thing is the internet started out as a really wonderful tool for two-way interactive information. And all of a sudden, the model of one-to-many, a radio station to all the receivers out there, a cable station to all the subscribers out there, that approach to the internet is being lobbied by AOL and Microsoft and others, that this will be a one-to-many again, and we'll be just sending a lot of commercial content out that you can pay bits per second is a new term that people are talking about, that your information consumption will be metered in a bit per second. How many bits or bytes of data and information you want, you'll pay a bit per second rate for what you consume, and it's a one-to-many thing. So I think I saw radio disappear that way historically. I saw television disappear that way. The idea of, you know, there were transceivers in the early days of radio. People were doing like a CB radio kind of thing, two-way networking, and then all of a sudden there was a big, you know, kind of push toward receivers. So you would buy a box that you could hear stuff, but you no longer had feedback. You couldn't talk back to your radio. And there's no reason you couldn't talk back to your radio real time, any time of the day. Well, yeah, the media center, as the umbrella of all the affiliates, GRTV, YCE Radio, GrandNet, GRID, the Research Institute, is very simple. It's 4 words long. It came out of the Capitol campaign, and it's building community through media. And the board of directors went away on a retreat and argued a bunch of names and ideas, and since we encompass radio, TV, internet, and research and archive, it had to work for everyone. So it's generic or general enough that each affiliate can get their arms around it, but it's diverse enough to accommodate all the different applications that we do at the Media Center.
So how are you building community?
We consider ourselves a social service agency. I think that's the first difference, is that we're not about TV. It's the drill and the hole thing again. You know, you go get the drill because you need the holes. Well, we have the camcorder because we want to affect social change. And you have an internet lab because you want to affect social change. We're about improving social conditions through media training, access to equipment, and transmission. And we do that on a first-come, first-served, non-discriminatory, content-neutral basis. So people are able to walk into the media center with an idea and have us help focus them how to improve social conditions through various forms of media. Now, the First Amendment component of the media center says training tools, which is some people want to destroy society through media. And we're in an awkward spot in that regard that we cannot discriminate against those who don't want to build community through media. We as an organization do, but we will provide facilities, equipment, and transmission options to individuals who, frankly, may have a deconstructionist attitude against capitalism or anything else out there. And since we are not content arbiters, those people are able to use the media center too. And in some respect, they're members of the community, like it or not. They, most of them are walking in from around the neighborhood, and so they may be talking about destroying community, but they're doing it at a media center that believes in building community through media. So there is a little bit of dichotomy there. Well, yeah, I'm always a little cautious of recommending any particular model. See the organic value of community media and its development. And just like animals adapt to the environment they're in, community media has to adapt to the environments it's in. So there's no cookie-cutter approach that you pick this up, drop it with a helicopter into another community and it works. I don't believe that. Every community has to look at its applications. I do think the simple notion that affecting social change through information technology will require us all to be bitstream activists. I think that's fundamental. And how you build off that, and whether you integrate radio or you don't integrate radio, or there's already a community radio station in your town, so you can't replicate it by law probably because there's no more licenses available, but maybe you partner with them. So there are a lot of anomalies, which is the magic of community media. I do think that we have to be forward-thinking and realizing that this digital revolution is not just hype by advertisers, that we truly have crossed a certain threshold into this integration of voice, video, and data into a common bit stream. That, I keep saying it over and over, but I can't agree enough that that's imperative. Cable television could end up kind of being the Pony Express of the future. I mean, how long are people going to be willing to pay one price for a lump of channels when they only watch a few of them? It almost seems that even AT&T doesn't call themselves, cable. It's AT&T Broadband and Internet Services. That's the name of the company. The broad company is AT&T Broadband and Internet Services. I kept looking for cable in their name. I couldn't find it. They have a little subdivision, AT&T Cable Services, but they've already taken the leap that they're into broadband and Internet Services. So community media needs to look at that. What I like about integrating voice, video, and data into a ubiquitous digital platform, which is what we've done, call it what you will, it's scalable. We're working with the neighborhood association on converting a house into a mini media center. And essentially imagine just a house in a neighborhood would have a live television studio in the living room for a hot studio with some lights and inexpensive production capability. A bedroom would have a multimedia edit suite and internet portal where you can walk in and edit your video if you want, edit your audio, digitize your video, digitize your audio, do a live show on the internet with audio, do a live show on the internet with audio or video. Just a multimedia suite. Training, laptop checkout, internet access, all within a house. And the director is thinking about living upstairs in the house, so it would still have bedrooms upstairs. The kitchen stays a kitchen because it is in a neighborhood and you got to eat, and that brings people together. So yeah, it's scalable. And it depends on what's available technologically. It depends on the skills of the people involved. It depends on the connectivity that can be afforded, whether you even have a cable channel or LP FM, low power FM radio license. So it's going to be different everywhere, is I guess what I'm saying. But there are some simple principles that I think we need to practice or we risk perishing. I think it's that serious. This whole movement of community television and its 25-year history could be a blip on the radar screen of information, history, that it was a great idea and it worked really well, and they should have diversified their income before cable dumped them, and they should have been involved in something besides cable when the rest of the world went digital, and they didn't. It's such a shame, because it could have been a good thing, you know. I'd hate to read the epitaph on community television that way. There's one side of me that would love to talk about all the people I know that have the vision still, but I know there's second and even third generation access workers now, or community media workers, that have it. They're in a different paradigm. And just a quick anecdote, we had a young student who came to the media center for an orientation, and after the orientation he walked up to me. You know, he heard about the media center and the rules and regs, and it's a little heavy on the rules and regs, and he said, "Mr. Koning, I believe you've created the institution my generation will be forced to dismantle." Oh man, it's free, there's First Amendment protection, there's nice gear and a beautiful space, well lit, well lighted, you know, I mean, but I just realized that's how life goes, and it perpetuates. So on one level, you don't want to be too institutionalized, because you're ripe for revolution. But on the other hand, there's got to be some fundamental beliefs. And I'm not sure as an industry or a movement we've done the best job of perpetuating those fundamental beliefs, that this is a social movement, and that we are social servants, and that the flashy toys and equipment and model numbers are the drills when we're really looking for, we need holes. And I'm not sure that that's been passed along that well, you know. So I'm hearing some things about some leadership institutes, and we're talking about at the Media Center to start hosting some community media institutes, where we would have people come in for 3 or 4 days, you know, fly in, live right around the Media Center, and go through a curriculum to talk about the history, the technology, the integration to digital, the values, the mission, and kind of, you know, make it just kind of a starting point for a newer generation of access practitioners or community media practitioners. Because it's a tough as hell job. You got to stay up on policy, what's going on in your city council or your state or federal government, Supreme Court. You got to be on top of infrastructure, where the cables are, the wires are, where the points of presence are, how you connect to them. You got to be up on hardware and software, both computer, internet, cable gear. Then you got to think about creative applications and training models and, you know, curriculum. Then you've got to be out there working with your board on the basic politics of the operation. Then you got the day-to-day, you know, disasters of people thinking that you're some kind of psychologist who wants to hear every problem they have and you're going to fix them somehow. And then you got to channel the knowledge. It's unbelievable learning curve as a field, and very few people, if any, have mastered it in its entirety. And I realize it's a goal, like the mountain I'm seeing over your shoulder, that I'm working my way up that mountain. I don't know if I'll make it in time, but it's a holistic approach to this, you know, using information technology to promote social change and improvement. That's really the mission. And the tools come and go, and they're going to change, and the infrastructure is going to change, and the policy is going to change, and the people are going to change. But I think if we can drive that home to everybody involved in the industry or the business or the movement, we'll be better off. Yeah, I think you hit a key point. Media literacy is probably one of the best panaceas for, I almost would dare say, culture and civilization in the long run. Because as we become a more mediated society where information is a commodity promoted for commercial consumption, we have a world where the United States has their TV on 7 hours and 14 minutes a day. We've got 20% of the world population consuming 80% of the world's, and we are in, by, about, and of media, and we don't even know it. It's kind of like a fish in water. You ask a fish, well, what do you know about water? They don't know anything about water, because it is. It just is. And what do you ask people, what do you know about media and its effect and technique and control and influence and motivation, financial background, and it just is. TV is. It was there when you were a little baby. It was the second tit you sucked on after your mother's. You know, your eyes were sucking. And media literacy is an attempt to analyze, critique, you know, deconstruct and create media so that it's not water that you're unaware of, that you start to look at it more critically and you say, what's the motive behind that message? Who created that? Would it be different if it was in a different media, you know, or medium? What's the difference if you hear it or you see it? How am I physically affected? What's the biological effect of information on me? And there's a big biological effect. I mean, photons, which are light waves, have mass and weight. And if an image comes off a TV screen and those photons hit your eyeball and bounce through your optic nerve and into your brain, there is a physical effect. We're talking about things moving around and changes in your body. So what's that mean? What's the difference between the physiological effect of media and the psychological effect of media? I mean, it's worth looking into, especially with over 7 hours a day each television's on, you know, in the U.S. And so you've got more TVs than telephones or bathtubs in homes, you know, so we ought to look at it a little more critically, especially when fewer and fewer companies, i.e. ideologies, own the resources of media and are perpetuating the messages of that media. Then we really ought to be thinking about it. Media literacy is that tool to give people a fair shot at defending themselves from the onslaught of a rainbow slush of radio, television, internet, what else coming at us every day. And it's only going to get worse. I do, and not so much for the viewers, but the ideology. In other words, I don't think a lot of the commercial programmers are too worried about the viewership, especially since you have to have cable to see it. You're only talking about penetration rates between 60 and 70% on a nationwide level. You got so many channels on cable that nobody has a very big share. I think the biggest share on any channel is still less than 10% of the viewing audience, so it's really dispersed in that regard. So I'm not so sure that community television is perceived as a threat for programming eyeballs. But I do think commercial media is waking up to the fact that we are out there demystifying the magic of television, and that there are people who see public access as an interesting conceptual alternative. And who does control what's on that channel? Who puts those programs on? Where do they come from? How come it's the only thing local I see on TV anymore? Most affiliates, ABC, NBC, and CBS, find it way too expensive to produce local programming outside of news. And so they don't. And Access still does. So there's going to be a big value there. So I think ideologically we're far more of a threat to commercial media, our commercial media counterparts, certainly than we are in a bottom line sense. But in some respects that probably than the bottom line competition. Yeah, and that's a good question, because there are being challenged right now, responsibility. I think if you follow a few guidelines, there are court precedents on your side at an access center to indemnify you from any liability from independent producers. One, as an access center, a community television center, or an internet provider for that matter, because the Communications Decency Act was repealed by the Supreme Court that said that an internet service provider is not liable for the speech that goes across their servers. And when you think about it, if in fact you have a bunch of people using your internet service provider to send their messages, there's a privacy element not to screen those messages in the first place. And nobody would ever think to hold the phone company accountable because McVeigh used a telephone to plan to bomb the Mira Federal Building in Oklahoma City. Did anybody say we should go after the phone company because he used a phone to plan the bombing? No, 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 no. So access centers need to follow some models that are out there, and that is, you are content neutral, you don't pre-screen, so you're not investing yourself into the programming prior to its broadcast, and you put it on with people signing a release form saying that they accept the full responsibility. Now, there was a Supreme Court case, Denver area versus the FCC, that essentially said that public access channels are public forum, like a public park. And if you manage the public park, people come into the public park, and they register a time to have a rally or to use the public park, and then they use it. If they cross a line and do something that might be illegal, then the authorities, the prosecuting attorney or whatever it is in your community, intervene, or you call the cops and they deal with it. You aren't the policeman, you aren't the public prosecutor in the community, so you don't even have the right to intervene if speech appears to be illegal or obscene. Those are legal terms. Slander, sedition, obscenity, those are legal terms that have been argued for years, and it takes a court of law or a group of citizens as a jury of your peers to make the decision what's obscene, what's slanderous, what's seditious. So an access center finds itself in a very intriguing spot, a tough one, and that is that you are not the censor. You don't have the authority over this content, and therefore you don't have the responsibility over the content. There are a number of cases that have validated this point, including a couple producers in Austin, Texas, who went to jail for obscene programming that a jury of their peers, actually I think it was a judge, said was obscene. The access center was indemnified, the city was indemnified, the county was indemnified, and the cable company was indemnified. So based on a Supreme Court case and several pretty good court legal cases in the history, if you keep your nose out of people's programs ahead of time, if you have them sign an indemnification form that says they're responsible for the content, they're not going to do anything slanderous, seditious, libel, obscene, or commercial, which is a unique thing, no commercial programming, you're pretty well off historically. You may still have to hire a lawyer every once in a while, and if I was an access director, I'd be a good friend of the American Civil Liberties Union in my town. In fact, I serve on their board of directors, and they're ready, willing, and able to help out the access center, community media center, should we get some slap suits, which are essentially a suit that somebody files just to wear you down and burn up your resources to defend yourself. Because anybody can sue anybody for anything at any time. That's just the way the American law is. And it costs you money to defend yourself. But access has got a good background. And if you really hit a nasty snag where some constitutional challenge is going against your access center based on the First Amendment, call the Alliance for Communications Democracy, which is a nonprofit group I'm the president of this year, and we've been around for 12 years, and we intervene in court cases where independent producers and others' rights are constitutionally abridged. And we're there to help. Volunteering your time to produce television at a public access channel in America is a luxury for the middle class, quite frankly, when you think about it. There are certainly some activists who are out there doing it, but if you're a single mother or father of two and you're working a couple jobs and you got to maintain a household, when are you going to have time to do community television? Extremely time consuming. As much as we try to keep red tape to a minimum, there is red tape. It takes some time and energy. You got to have a burning desire to pull it off, to get through the whole system and get in line and get the gear and do the show and edit it, which takes a ton of time. So we've got to realize some of this, and I think from a policy standpoint too, we need to think that this whole idea of first come, first serve, that's kind of biased in and of itself. It sounds pretty generic, but if you're closer, you're there, first come, first serve. If you are wealthy, you have time to be there. I think we need to reach out beyond first come, first serve to pockets of the community that are non-traditional users because of language, that are non-traditional users because of lack of wealth, lack of time to do it. And so we need to find ways to go beyond the first come, first serve. We'll take anybody when they come down here. No. We got to get out. We got to get out in the community. We got to find ways to make it easier on folks. We need to do our access classes in multiple languages. We've got to have curriculum and materials printed in other languages. We've got to take time with outreach coordinators to go into communities at the time and the leisure and the luxury of that community group, that group of community members, to help them out where they're at, to do what they might be able to do when they can do it. And it's not easy, and it is time, time consumptive. And but I think from an access center, when you're looking at your budget, with my board, when we take our budget and we put it in a pie, circle, and we carve the circle up into little pieces of the pie, and we say, what are our priorities based on our money? Do we spend 60% of our money on personnel to help others, or do we spend 50, or do we spend 30, or do we spend 90? I mean, most public libraries in America spend 85% of their budget on people, not books, people. Books are maybe 10% of the budget of a library in America, because the people are interfacing with the, folks who want the books. So those can't be accidental decisions. And if in that circle of your budget pie chart you decide that outreach beyond first come, first serve is critical for community development and to be fair to non-traditional users, then you carve a chunk of your budget out to do that. And cameras are smaller and easier to use, like this one I'm talking into now, and you've got laptops that move around. For one quick example, we're putting a grant in, which I think we're going to get for a little truck called Web on Wheels. We're going to take a dozen laptops with wireless connectivity into inner city neighborhoods to do training in neighborhood centers and churches and small nonprofits and the Urban League and Job Corps. There'll be little wireless connectivity, so those 12 laptops will shoot a signal out to the Web on Wheels van that will then have either ISDN, DSL, cable modem, or wireless connectivity to internet. So we'll go into non-traditional areas where high-speed internet is not available. Literally, the infrastructure is not really there in many of those places for people to have high-speed internet connectivity. Bring a bunch of laptops, bring some trainers, bring the Web on Wheels truck, and do some training. And maybe like a bookmobile, we'll even circulate it, into certain neighborhoods at certain times every week, so you can come check your email, take an extra class to learn more about it, job skill, construction. So we're going out, we're getting out of the four walls and trying to take things into the field and hoping to do mini media centers all around town that are hardwired to the central media center and then connected to the internet from there and to the cable system from there and satellite uplink and satellite downlink. So we need to expand and get out, make it easier on people to do this work in the area that they're most comfortable at the time that's most efficient. And then hopefully instill a warm, caring, responsive environment. So when this person comes down to do their show, they realize they're among friends that are not judgmental, that are not thinking they're in their way. Those pesky producers sometimes, at access centers. I've seen staffs at access centers who sit around and talk about the pesky producers. It'd be so much easier if they just weren't here. Well, then we shouldn't even be there if they're not there. So it's not an easy answer, and I know I've been running around the issue a little bit, but we have to be cognizant of what it's like to be that person and to walk a mile in their shoes to understand what it takes to be successful. Think out of the box and get out of the access center and get equipment into the hands of non-traditional users in the environment they come from, and have them see people that they're familiar with, within the access center, so that we're cognizant of our hiring practices, so that our staff is a diverse makeup of the community as a whole. So somebody comes from a certain pocket of society into the media center, there might be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 people there that are like them, and will make the environment workable for them. And we have a natural attrition rate at the media center. There's always new people coming, always old people going. There are a few stalwarts who've been there forever, and some people have walked out of orientation in a huff because they thought we were some kind of social activists that were trying to crumble the capital model of American democracy. Well, that's not true, we aren't. But we talk honestly about what we think is going on in commercial media and what we think is different about community media and television. And some people find that so offensive they walk away. And that's a shame, but sometimes it happens, and we'll try to talk to them too if we can. But we're pretty open to a lot of different folks with a lot of different belief patterns, and trying to do more and more outreach, trying to give them whatever tools they need to send whatever message they want to in whatever medium is available. And it's about the best you can do, I think. Things take longer than you expect. Television doesn't happen at the same rate it's viewed. In other words, you watch a minute of TV, it didn't take a minute to make that minute of TV. In fact, we often tell people, especially around television, that there's some formulas you ought to keep in mind. It's easily going to take you an hour of your life for every minute of final video someone might see. And that's even a narrow ratio. It might be 2 hours, might be 3 hours. But Also, when it comes to television, you ought to be thinking that shooting video, which you think is television, producing television, is only 20% of the process. 40% of your time is preparing to shoot video, taking the classes, signing up for the classes, learning how to use the equipment, getting the videotape, getting in line, da-da-da-da-da. 40% of your time is before you shoot 1 minute of videotape or digital media. 20% of your time is out there shooting. And actually, that effectiveness of that 20% is wholly dependent on how well you planned in the first 40%. So you shoot video, which everybody thinks is all of TV, but that's 20%. 40% of your time after you shoot video is getting your act together to post-produce it, to promote it, to get in line to get it on the channel, to let your friends know about it. So really 80% of TV has nothing to do with shooting video, quite realistically. So we try to give people a dose of reality, and I tell them, anecdotal story, as do other staff. I spent 17 hours editing a 30-second public service announcement. And the 30-second commercials you see on TV often take more time and cost more money than the entire show they're embedded in. A 30-second Coke commercial can easily cost more than a 30-minute sitcom that it's part of. So what you see on television and what you can expect from what you do through television, there might be a disparity, and it's going to take you a while to get there. But there are great success stories, and I'll tell you, when you tell all your friends your show's on and you sit back in your house and fire up your own television with some popcorn and some buds around and you see your first production on community television, there ain't no feeling in the world that is that good. And that hopefully will get people hooked to keep trying to work the system, to produce the video, to make a change in their community. And that's what we can hope for, and it works sometimes, and other times it doesn't. But I think we all get up every day knowing it can work and will work. So what you see on television and what you can expect from what you do through television, there might be a disparity, and it's going to take you a while to get there. But there are great success stories, and I'll tell you, when you tell all your friends your show's on and you sit back in your house and fire up your own television with some popcorn and some buds around and you see your first production on community television, there ain't no feeling in the world that is that good. And that hopefully will get people hooked to keep trying to work the system, to produce the video, to make a change in their community. And that's what we can hope for, and it works sometimes, and other times it doesn't. But I think we all get up every day knowing it can work and will work.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure to hear from you, and I'll get back to you with some feedback when people
Yeah, yakety yak yak. Don't talk back.